Okay. Thank you very much. So moving right along now to our second piece. Second piece is called Bury On by Dr. Robert Morris. Again, why specifically reach out to Dr. Morris? Well, again, the Eastman connection. So Dr. Morris is actually a current Eastman professor in music theory and composition. And so hypothetically, I wouldn't even have to email him. I could just pop into his office and ask him any questions. That hasn't happened yet. Okay. Additionally, his music represents a completely different style than the other composers listed, as well as with most euphonium repertoire available. And so, based on his other music that he'd written in the past, I knew that he was going to create something that our repertoire lacked, and something that was unique for us. Additionally, after studying 12-tone music here at Eastman, I discovered his name was just peppered all over publications that we studied, and so I knew that his name would certainly carry weight in the program. Also, he had actually not written for euphonium yet, unlike Dr. Adler. So again, that appealed to me as well for multiple reasons. For one thing, if the work is a success, it could actually inspire other composers, right? It can inspire other composers to write for the instrument, and of course, expanding what I started. Additionally, it could affect his subsequent works in his own composition. So certainly things that motivated me. So moving into a little bit specifics about baryons. So it's a single movement through composed work for solo euphonium and piano. And you might be wondering what a baryon is, as was I. It is a composite subatomic particle. Its roots are from the Greek word meaning heavy. So at the time when it was discovered, it was one of the heaviest known subatomic particles. And hopefully when you hear the piece later, you might understand that title of that a little bit more, as both parts are very kind of jumping around like particles. Additionally, the piece is intricately, and one could argue even mathematically composed based on a 12-tone row at the beginning, and I will go into that here in just a second. Additionally, because of the way it's constructed, it contains very little traditional harmony and traditional other traditional aspects of music. Additionally, the work features what's called total serialism, which I will go into momentarily. So the work begins, just as I mentioned, with a 12-tone row on the piano. So you can see here, this is the solo euphonium line, and it contains all 12 chromatic pitches. It's actually further outlined by the piano with just very light accompaniment. Now I'd like to quickly make sure that we understand the different transformations of a 12-tone row, and I will try to be brief with this. So, so the initial 12-tone row presented by the euphonium that I just showed you on the last slide is what's called the prime form of the row. And then there are three other types of forms presented in this piece. So one is the inverted row. And to invert the row, all that means is you take all the intervals, and so you see in the chart, you see the 12-tone row in the euphonium, and then the numbers represent the number of half steps it takes to get from one note to the next. And so if you take, when you do the inverted row, you take that number, and whatever number adds to 12 with that goes in the inverted row. So 6 plus 6 equals 12, 2 plus 10 equals 12, et cetera, down the line. to retrograde the row, you just take the intervals from the inverted row and reverse them. So if you read the inverted row backwards, you get the retrograded row. And then to get the retrograde inversion, you simply take the intervals from the prime form up in the chart and reverse them. This will come in handy later on. Just a couple of other interesting facets about this piece. So the piece is divided into 20 different sections, and they're numbered appropriately on the score. And so in section 3, all the notes accounted for, both in the euphonium and the piano, form a complete 12-tone aggregate. When I say aggregate, that just means all 12 chromatic pitches are present. And so you can see the euphonium has 5 notes and the piano has 7. And so all 12 chromatic pitches are present there. And that happens in every measure in section 3 of the piece. So we come to our first recap, and I call it a recap because it's pretty much exactly like the beginning. We get a new version of that 12-tone row, and the accompaniment really thins out. So here's another 12-tone row in the euphonium, and I've charted it out again. And based on these intervals, you can see that it's the retrograded form of the row. Now I'd like to move into a couple of examples of total serialism. So it's not just the notes that are serialized. You know, obviously it's well constructed with all 12 chromatic pitches very intricately. However, the dynamics are oftentimes serialized as well. So in this example, if you take all the notes that are a mezzo forte dynamic and put them together, it's actually a retrograded form of a 12-tone row as well. So now for other examples of serialism, we have, not this kind of serial. Well, okay, yeah. Serialism, okay, sorry, not that kind of serialism. So other types of serialism include the articulation. So if you recall from Dr. Adler's piece, the slurred notes were significant. They were highlighting certain intervals. However, in this example, if you actually take out that middle triplet there in the slurs, then you actually get another form of the 12-tone row if you omit slurred notes. Now we arrive at our second recap. Again, the texture thins out significantly, and the notes are highlighted here for you, as well as the pitch class intervals. And based on these intervals, it is actually a retrograded version of the initial prime form of the row. For lack of time, I'm going to go and skip to the third recap, which is the very end of the piece. Once again, collaborating musicians thin out a little bit more. And there's only one form of the row left, so it's the inversion form. So the piece is clearly divided into 3 sections by these 3 recaps that we've discussed. So you have from the beginning to circle 6, and then you have from 7 through 13, and then 14 to 20. And I've simply just put all of those charts here in one big chart. And you can see that some of them are certain colors. The red to me is a little bit harder to see, but like the first B flat and the E are red. So you might be wondering why they were different colors throughout the presentation. Well, there's actually accompaniment rules. So if the note is red, the euphonium is sustained, and the piano is both 2 octaves lower and in unison and short. If the note is green, the euphonium plays with the piano an octave lower and a 5th higher. If it's blue, the euphonium is sustained with piano in octaves also sustained. If it's purple, the euphonium with piano in unison and 2 octaves and a major 3rd higher, or the 5th harmonic. So the ultimate reference, I guess, to 12-tone composition with this is that if you look at all these different notes that are in color, not the ones that are in black, you actually get a 12-tone complete aggregate in that as well. So before we perform the piece, I'd like to just point out some more unique aspects of this commission. So, as previously stated, Dr. Morris had actually not written for the euphonium before. Again, this appealed to me. And maybe it was the novelty of the instrument, I'm not sure, but he graciously agreed to write, and either way, he actually invited me to and initiated a meeting for us so I could play through the instrument with him a little bit and play up and down the range of it and play some different things for him to get an idea, which was really nice. And just some revisions that have occurred, mostly having to do with octave placement for both instruments. just for playability purposes. So the piece covers a very wide range of intervals in a very short period of time. So changing a few of those along the way certainly helps. But on that note, performance challenges, especially in comparison to what we already have in the phoneme repertoire. So similar to the Adler, this piece certainly offers adequate challenges for the performers, both of us. Again, the range covered on both instruments is quite wide and in a very short period of time. In fact, it's often that the piano is written in 3 staves rather than 2. It is particularly rhythmically challenging. Rhythms include quintuplets, sextuplets, septuplets, other uplets, and dotted 16ths. Not dotted 8/16ths, but dotted 16ths. Not something that we see all the time, certainly. Additionally, the collaboration of putting these intricate rhythms and parts together with the 2 musicians was certainly a test for us. The rhythms are difficult by themselves, much less when you try to line them up together because we're not often playing the same thing. So due to these factors and many others, the piece is actually very highly cerebral. It requires a lot of focus to play. However, I think that that's actually what makes it exciting. I think if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Right? So I'm going to ask Priscilla to go ahead and make her way up. And as we perform the work, try to listen for these recaps where the texture thins out and we have a new presentation of the 12-tone row. Also try to listen for any references to tonality. I also want to thank Priscilla Ewan for her hard work on this piece. And we hope that you enjoy Very Amplified by Dr. Moore.
you.